So today we're going to talk about multiplying and dividing integers. There is really only one rule for multiplying and dividing integers, and that's really to count your negatives. You're going to multiply and divide as normal, but you're going to count those negatives. If you have an even number of negatives, your result will be positive. So even numbers are 2, 4, 6, or 8 negatives. Probably not going to have any more than that, but you could go on forever. Odd number of negatives is going to give you an overall negative answer. So odd numbers would be 1, 3, 5, or 7. So for instance, if I had two negative numbers, doesn't it take two negatives? So you could look at these two negatives. Don't they result in making a plus sign? If you put this negative here and this negative here, they combine to make a positive. So you can think of it that way. It takes two negatives to pair up and make a positive. If you have three negatives, which would be an odd number, these two here are going to pair up to make a positive. But then you have this one left over. So you can make a positive with two of them, but this one doesn't have any other negative to match up to. So it's an odd number out, and your result is going to end up being negative. So if you can pair up all of your negatives without having any left over, you've got a positive answer. If you pair up your negatives and you have a negative left over, you're going to have a negative answer. So let's look at the following problems. Let's make it straight. There we go. So for question number 1, we're just going to multiply as normal, but we're going to figure out the sign first. Because you have one negative, it doesn't have any other negative to pair up to, your overall answer has to be negative. So then at this point, you're going to ignore the signs and just multiply as normal. So we typically multiply from left to right. So 4 times 2 is 8, and then 8 times 3 is 24. So your answer is negative 24. Question number 2. This time you have 1, 2, 3 negatives. These two negatives can pair up to make a positive, but this one doesn't have one to pair up with, so our overall answer is going to be negative. Then ignore your signs and just multiply as usual. So 5 times 6 is 30. 30 times 10 is 300. So your answer is negative 300. Question number 3. Looks pretty complicated, but it's really not that bad. We're going to discuss how to reduce a fraction. Fractions are really just a division problem. So before we even start, we're going to count our negatives. We've got 1, 2, 3 negatives. These two negatives here can pair up and make a positive. This negative doesn't have another negative to pair up with, so once again, we have a negative answer. And so here's our division bar. And so then all we're going to do is ignore the signs and just work with reducing this overall fraction. For every number in the numerator, if you can divide that number by the same number in the denominator, you can cancel and reduce a fraction. So look at the 2. We're just going to start with the 2. Can't the 2 cancel into the 4? In other words, the 2 and the 4, we can divide both of these by the number 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Then move on to the 7. The 7 cannot cancel with the 3 or the 2. 3 and 2 do not have a common divisor with the 7. So it can't reduce or cancel out. Then the 15, it does have a common divisor with the 3. Both the 15 and the 3 can be divided by 3. So when we do that, 3 divided by 3 is 1. 15 divided by 3 is 5. Then all that's left is to multiply straight across and give an answer here, and multiply straight across in the denominator and give an answer here. So 1 times 7 is 7, times 5 is 35. So we have 35 in the numerator, and in the denominator we have 1 times 2 is 2. And so your final answer is negative 35 halves. Do not change that into a mixed number. Do not change that into a decimal. The last problem on this section, number 4, we have two negatives. So those two negatives can pair up together and make a positive. So your overall answer here is going to be positive. So we're going to leave no sign there because it's assumed with no sign that it's positive. Then all that's left is to divide 128 by 4. So we're going to use long division. We're going to take 128 and divide that by 4. So 4 goes into 12 3 times. So 3 times 4 is 12. So we're going to subtract 12. We get 0. And you're going to bring down the 8. 4 goes into 8 twice. 2 times 4 is 8. So we're going to subtract 8 with no remainder, which is what we want. So that means that 4 divides into 128 32 times. And so our solution is a positive 32 because 4 goes evenly into 128. Then these are problems that my students did on their whiteboards. And it's just a mixture, a review of positive, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing integers. So remember, you only have one rule for addition that's kind of split into two parts. If you're adding two numbers with the same sign, you add and keep the sign. If you are adding two numbers with different signs, you're going to subtract and keep the sign of the larger. If you are subtracting, you're going to change that into an addition statement by adding the opposite. And we talked about the fact that we use the words keep, change, change. So you keep the first number in front of the subtraction sign, you change subtraction to addition, and change the sign of the number following subtraction to its opposite sign. Keep, change, change. And then you just follow the rules for addition. And then we just went over the multiplication division rules. So let's look at number 1. Negative 5 plus negative 7. We are adding different signs. So we subtract. 7 minus 5 is 2. And keep the sign of the larger. There are more positives than there are negatives. So our answer is going to be positive 2. Number 2. We are dividing. So all we're going to do is count negatives. All I have is one negative. It cannot pair up with any other negative, so my overall answer has to have a negative value. And then 56 divided by 8 is 7. So our answer is negative 7. Number 3, we're multiplying. So we're going to count negatives. So we've got 1, 2 negatives. These two are going to pair up and make a positive. So I'm not going to put a sign over here. 11 times 13 is 143. So your answer is positive 143. Then look at question number 4. This time we're dividing. We still count negatives. We've got 2 negatives. They are both going to pair up and make a positive, so our overall answer here is positive. 24 divided by 3 is 8. So you have an answer that is positive 8. On number 15, we're subtracting. I absolutely have to see you doing keep, change, change. You're going to keep the first number exactly as it is. You don't change its sign or anything. You're going to change this to addition, and this is a positive 14. We're going to change it to its opposite sign, which is negative 14. So here's our keep, change, change. So keep, change, change. So now we are adding two negative numbers. So when adding two numbers with the same sign, you're going to add and keep the sign. So if I add, I have 13 plus 14 is 27. And I'm going to keep the sign, which makes it negative. So we have negative 27. For number 6, we're back to multiplying, so that means we're counting negatives. We only have one negative. So our overall value is going to be negative. And you just multiply 9 times 13. So if you have to, do that long-handed. 13 times 9. 9 times 3 is 27. carry the 2. 9 times 1 is 9, plus the 2 makes that 11. So 9 times 13 is 117. So our overall answer is negative 117.